He thought he could corner Tiffany Trump, but instead, she flipped the script and exposed his biggest lie on live TV. The lights were bright, and the air was thick with anticipation as Tiffany Trump stood in front of a packed room. Cameras flashed, and the crowd murmured with excitement, each person eager to see what would unfold in this rare public moment. Tiffany had kept a relatively low profile, but today was different. Today, she was about to stand up for her family in a way that would silence her critics. The room was filled with reporters, all armed with microphones and eager to get their next big headline. Among them was one reporter, known for his biting questions and critical attitude towards the Trump family. He was no stranger to controversy and often went after political figures with ruthless intensity. As Tiffany stood at the podium, poised and confident, she could feel the weight of the moment on her shoulders. The media was watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. But she wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. The reporter wasted no time, leaning forward with a smug smile on his face as he raised his microphone. "Tiffany," he began, his tone dripping with condescension, "you've spent much of your life in the shadow of your father and the rest of your family. Many people believe you've used your last name to advance your career. But what have you really done for this country?" A wave of tension rippled through the room. It was the kind of question designed to provoke, to get under her skin. The reporters in the room waited, knowing how Tiffany would respond. Or so they thought. Instead of flinching, Tiffany stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she met the reporter's eyes. Her voice was calm but carried an undeniable power as she responded. "Let me tell you something," Tiffany began, her words measured but firm. "My family and I have been in the public eye for years, and yes, I've had opportunities because of my last name. But what people fail to understand is that we've worked hard for everything we've achieved. No one handed us anything. I've worked in law and business, and I'm now committed to making a difference in this country. I don't need to defend myself, but I will make one thing clear. I've earned my place here." The reporter looked taken aback. He had expected a defensive response, a misstep that he could use against her. Instead, Tiffany's words hit hard, cutting through the air with clarity and resolve. The room was silent, the reporters now paying close attention to what she would say next. "I don't owe anyone an explanation," Tiffany continued, her voice strong. "I'm here because I want to be. I'm here because I believe in the values this country stands for, and I'm proud to be a part of it. My family may have a complicated history in politics, but that doesn't define who I am or what I've done. I've worked for what I have, and I'll continue to do so." The room, once filled with murmurs of skepticism, now seemed to pause. Tiffany's words had shifted the atmosphere. She had taken control of the moment and turned it into a statement of her own strength. The reporter, once so sure of his narrative, found himself speechless for a moment. He had underestimated Tiffany, and now it was clear that he was no longer in charge of the conversation. Her words had left the media stunned. Tiffany Trump had just proven that she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself and her family, regardless of the public scrutiny they faced. Her confidence and composure in the face of a biting question had shifted the narrative, showing the world that she was more than just a name. As the press conference continued, Tiffany handled each question with the same calm assurance, leaving no room for anyone to undermine her. The reporters, once eager to tear her down, now found themselves struggling to keep up. The tables had turned, and Tiffany had just given the media a lesson in strength, resilience, and dignity. The tension in the room was palpable as Tiffany Trump's powerful words hung in the air. The media had expected her to falter, to crumble under the weight of the constant scrutiny that had followed her family for years. But instead, she had emerged victorious, her confidence shining through. The room, once filled with skepticism and judgment, was now filled with admiration. Tiffany had not only defended herself, but she had also made a statement that resonated deeply with those who had watched her rise to this moment. As the reporters settled back into their seats, trying to process what had just happened, another voice rang out from the back of the room. A liberal commentator, known for his harsh criticisms of the Trump family, raised his hand. "Tiffany," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "it's easy to talk about values and hard work when you've been born into privilege. But what about those of us who don't have the same resources? How can you say you work hard for everything you've achieved when you've had so much handed to you? A murmur ran through the room as everyone turned to look at Tiffany. The question was a familiar one, the same one she had heard countless times before. It was a question that people used to undermine her success, to minimize her accomplishments because of her family name. But Tiffany wasn't intimidated. She had faced this kind of attack before, and she wasn't about to back down now. With a deep breath, Tiffany stood a little taller. Her voice remained steady, but the fire in her words was undeniable. "You know," she began, her gaze piercing, "it's easy to look at someone's life from the outside and make assumptions about what they've been through. But you don't know me, and you don't know the work I've put in to get here. Just because I come from a family that's well known doesn't mean everything has been handed to me. I've had to fight for every opportunity I've had." The room went quiet as Tiffany's words hit home. Her face remained calm, but there was a fierceness in her eyes, a quiet strength that couldn't be ignored. She continued, "I've faced challenges, just like everyone else. I've had to prove myself, not only to the world, but also to those who have always assumed I was nothing more than a name. But I'm more than that. I've worked in law, I've worked in business, and now I'm here because I believe in the principles that have made this country great. No amount of privilege can take away the value of hard work and dedication." The liberal commentator, who had expected to get under her skin, found himself at a loss for words. The reporters in the room, once eager to attack, were now quiet, listening to Tiffany's every word. For the first time in a long while, the media found themselves on the receiving end of a powerful message. Tiffany wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or judged based on their family name. She wasn't the person the media had painted her to be. She was more than that. And today, she was going to make sure the world knew it. As the press conference went on, Tiffany continued to answer each question with the same level of poise and strength. She addressed concerns about her family's involvement in politics, her role as an advocate for change, and her future plans. But no matter what the reporters asked, Tiffany's message remained clear. She was here to make a difference, to be her own person, and to prove that she was capable of so much more than people gave her credit for. For every question that tried to diminish her accomplishments, Tiffany had a thoughtful, compelling response that left the media struggling to keep up. Her words had a weight to them, a truth that couldn't be ignored. And as the press conference neared its end, it was clear that Tiffany Trump had just changed the narrative around her forever. The media, once skeptical and dismissive, now saw her in a new light. They had expected a weak, defenseless woman who would cower under their questioning. But instead, they had witnessed the strength, resilience, and determination of a woman who was ready to stand up for herself, her family, and the values she believed in. As Tiffany left the stage, the applause was deafening. She had done what many thought was impossible. She had silenced her critics with nothing more than her words and her unshakable confidence. And as she walked away from the podium, it was clear that this moment would be remembered for a long time. Tiffany Trump had proven that she was more than just a name. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Tiffany Trump walked off the stage, she could feel the weight of the moment settling over her. It wasn't just the press conference or the reporters' questions that defined the day. It was a shift in the atmosphere, the quiet realization that she had, for the first time, truly stood on her own 2 feet. She had defended herself, but more importantly, she had defended the values she had always believed in. In that room, amidst the chaos and the noise, she had made her statement. She was not just the daughter of a famous man. She was her own person, with her own thoughts, beliefs, and voice. The media's reaction was swift. Outlets that had once mocked her, calling her nothing more than a privileged product of her father's success, were now scrambling to adjust their tone. Headlines changed from criticism to admiration, from questions of her competence to praise for her poise and strength. The very reporters who had tried to undermine her now found themselves reflecting on her words, realizing that Tiffany Trump had done what few public figures ever managed to do. She had commanded respect through sheer force of character. Back in the wings, Tiffany paused for a moment, taking a breath. She could hear the soft murmur of voices coming from behind the curtain as the cameras clicked away. Her family, her father's political team, and the people who believed in her were all watching, waiting for her to speak. for her to reflect on what had just transpired. But Tiffany didn't need to reflect. She knew exactly what had happened. She had said everything she needed to say, and now it was up to the world to listen. The fight, the struggle, the years of being underestimated, they had all led up to this very moment. It had been about proving something, not to the media, not to the public, but to herself. She wasn't just another Trump. She was Tiffany, a woman of intelligence, strength, and conviction. And today, the world had seen that. As she stood in the quiet backstage area, her father, Donald Trump, walked over to her. His face was stern, as it always was, but there was a warmth in his eyes that Tiffany had always recognized. He pulled her into a quick hug, his voice low but filled with pride. "You did great, Tiffany," he said, his words simple but powerful. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for what's right. You made it clear that no one could define you but you." Tiffany smiled, the weight of the day slowly lifting from her shoulders. "Thanks, Dad. I didn't do it for the media. I did it for me. I did it for everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough." Donald nodded, the understanding between them unspoken but clear. He had been there, too, the object of media derision, the target of endless criticism. And in that moment, he saw his daughter not as his child, but as a formidable force in her own right, as they walked out of the building together. Tiffany felt the eyes of the world upon her, but this time, it wasn't the judgmental stares of those who had tried to tear her down. This time, it was admiration, recognition. The world was starting to see her for who she truly was. The media frenzy continued for days as Tiffany's powerful stand reverberated across social media, news outlets, and political forums. People were talking about her, sharing clips of her response, praising her for her composure, her confidence, and the conviction with which she spoke. She was no longer the quiet Trump daughter. She had become a symbol of strength, someone who had carved out her own space in the political landscape, not by riding on the coattails of her father's success, but by speaking her truth. But with that newfound attention came the inevitable pushback. Some of the same liberal pundits who had criticized her for years now found themselves scrambling to discredit her words. They tried to undermine her message, claiming that she was merely following her father's footsteps, echoing his rhetoric without offering anything new. But Tiffany wasn't deterred. She knew that the narrative was shifting, and no amount of backlash would change what had already been said. She had shown up for herself. In doing so, she had proved to the world that she was more than just a political pawn. In the days that followed, Tiffany kept her focus on the work ahead. She knew that her words had made an impact, but she also knew that action spoke louder than anything else. She couldn't afford to rest on the success of one press conference. The journey had just begun. There were still people who doubted her, who saw her as nothing more than an extension of her family's legacy. But Tiffany was determined to show them that she was so much more than that. She would prove, through her actions, that her voice was one that deserved to be heard. At home, her mother, Ivana Trump, called to check on her. The two women shared a deep bond, one that had been forged over years of mutual respect and understanding. Ivana had always been a source of strength for Tiffany, offering guidance and wisdom whenever she needed it most. "You were amazing, darling," Ivana said, her voice filled with pride. "You've shown the world that you're not afraid to stand up for what's right, and that takes courage." Tiffany smiled, feeling the warmth of her mother's words. "I'm just getting started, Mom. There's so much more to do." Her mother's laughter filled the line. "I know, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Keep fighting the good fight." The days turned into weeks, and Tiffany's presence continued to grow in the political landscape. She wasn't just a media figure now. She was a force for change, someone who was speaking out not just for herself, but for the millions of people who felt unheard, unseen, or underestimated. She spoke at rallies, at fundraisers, at events where her message resonated with people from all walks of life. She wasn't just a Trump. She was Tiffany, and her voice was one that couldn't be ignored. And as she stood in front of thousands of supporters, her heart swelling with pride, Tiffany knew that the world had finally recognized her for what she was, a woman of substance, a woman of strength, and a woman who would never be silenced again. Tiffany Trump had done what few in her position ever could. She had carved her own path, one that wasn't defined by the media, by the public, or even by her family name. She had shown the world that her voice mattered, and that she would stand up for what she believed in, no matter the cost.